Welcome to Kubrick Quest Episode 8. Today we'll be talking about Stanley Kubrick's eighth feature film, the 1968 science fiction epic 2001: A Space Odyssey. While not a direct adaptation of any one single book like a lot of Kubrick's other films, this was heavily based on two short stories by the science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke, one of which was The Sentinel, which, let me get that in focus, there you go, it came out in 1951, and the other was Encounter in the Dawn, which came out in 1953. It's actually a pretty cool book. I got the collected short stories of Arthur C. Clarke, 980 pages. It'll take me a while to get through this, but I read those two first for this video, so you get two little book first movies. I'm going to touch on more of those short stories later and how they compare to the film and what parts of the film they obviously influenced. So what is this movie about? I'm sure a lot of you have heard of 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's very famous. Even if you haven't seen it, you know something from it. It's very iconic, very influential. But what is this movie about? Well, I'm going to try and do this in one take. Well, it starts off about 1 million years ago, and there's a bunch of apes just going about their day, surviving, doing primitive ape stuff, as they do. That is until a giant black rectangle known as the monolith shows up and makes the apes go bananas. Somehow, I guess through telepathic means, the monolith gives the apes instructions on how to use tools. The apes are then successful and don't get beaten up all the time and are able to hunt and not just survive, but thrive. And if you thought the Better Call Saul abrupt cut to the future was extreme, we get something like that but taken to the millionth degree. An ape throws a bone up in the air, and then all of a sudden, boom, suddenly we cut to 1 million years later. Now the story is about this military science space guy and his crew going to investigate one of those mysterious monoliths that's been buried on the moon for a very long time. He makes the long, secret trek out to the monolith and gets close enough to touch it, and then the monolith emits a very high-pitched frequency or something, and all the astronauts seem to be in pain, having a very bad time. Don't totally know what's going on, but doesn't seem happy as they touched it. Then it cuts and we're aboard a big spaceship going somewhere with two awake humans, Frank and Dave, and some hibernating humans who are in cryogenic freeze for the space journey, as well as an onboard robot AI called HAL 9000 that's basically integrated into the entire spaceship. Everything seems to be going well, that is until HAL starts to malfunction and go rogue and ends up killing Frank and almost kills Dave, but Dave does a daring move to get back into the spaceship and then he shuts off HAL. Then it's revealed that their mission is really to go to Jupiter to investigate the origin of those black rectangle monoliths. Dave gets near Jupiter, then another big monolith appears and sucks Dave up into it. Then we get a 20-minute sequence of creepy lights and sounds and psychedelic kaleidoscopic 60s druggy space visuals. Then Dave appears in this nowhere land mystery room that the monoliths have presumably built for him. Dave lives out the rest of his life in this alien human zoo apartment thing. Then when he's about to die of old age, a monolith appears and turns him into a giant space baby. Got it? I did not actually manage to do that in one take, but I did the best I could. Either way, let me tell you about this movie's significance.
It will be significant.
If you didn't know, 2001: A Space Odyssey is one of the most significant, influential, widely known, widely imitated, talked about, referenced, debated movies, not just in science fiction genre, but of all time. You know, if you ever go to film school or take some classes in film history or appreciation or something like that, I guarantee you they're going to talk about this movie at some point. Like a number of other Kubrick movies, this was included into the Library of Congress's National Film Registry. It is also on countless lists from noted film critics of their best movies of all time. And I mean, Jesus Christ, just look how long the Wikipedia pages are on this movie. You got the page on the movie, you've got a page on interpretations of the movie, you've got a whole page just on the monolith, you've got a whole page just on the spaceship called Discovery 1, you've got a whole page just on the evil AI robot called HAL 9000, you've got a whole page just on the technologies seen in this movie, you've got a whole page of just this movie's influence in popular culture. And if that's not enough for you, we've also got a Wikipedia page just on the chess game that Dave was playing with HAL. And if that's not enough for you, we've also got a Wikipedia page on an unused film score for this movie. There's also more than one real-world space objects named after either Stanley Kubrick or something from this movie. Like I mentioned earlier, parts of 2001 were based on short stories from the sci-fi author Arthur C. Clarke, one of which being The Sentinel from 1951, so we're going to talk about that one now. So The Sentinel is the basis for the whole middle portion of the movie where the scientist guy is going out on a secret mission to investigate the monolith with his crew on the moon. That part of the movie does not follow the short story exactly, but it is based on it, so let's talk about how it differs from the original book. The Sentinel begins with an unnamed geologist astronaut guy living and working on the moon in what the book calls pressurized tractors, which I'm guessing are like mobile space stations, something like that. In the book, the geologist discovered the monolith while going about his work, whereas in the movie, the guy was actually going to the moon base to investigate the monolith that has already been discovered and they already knew some things about. In the book, the mysterious object in question wasn't described as a black rectangle monolith, but was instead a, quote, glittering, roughly pyramidal structure twice as high as a man, set in the rock like a many-faceted jewel. So it seems like it was a lot shinier compared to the monolith. Well, I guess anything would be shiny compared to it. Never mind. The space geologists in the book discovered the object at the top of a mountain or hill or plateau or something that they had to climb to go find this thing. Whereas in the movie, it was clearly buried underground in a part of the moon. They had to actually dig it out to see the full thing. Also in the book, the object was said to have some kind of force field around it, and the humans had a very hard time penetrating or chipping away at the object to actually inspect it, but eventually did so with nuclear power. The function of the mysterious object in the story was to be a, quote, beacon waiting for another intelligent life to find it, which seems to be basically the exact function it played in the movie. Also unrelated to the object/monolith in the story, Arthur C. Clarke describes the unnatural slowness at which things fall in space, specifically a pen, just like that famous shot in the movie, so maybe that's where they got that idea from. Encounter in the Dawn came out in 1953, so that's 2 years after The Sentinel. However, in the movie's timeline, this was actually the basis for the first section of the movie with all those primitive apes. Overall, this story differs more from the 2001 movie than The Sentinel does, but when I describe the plot of the short story here, I think you'll see the idea was there. So this story is about 3 scientists and a robot crew member traveling through space searching for other intelligent life. The crew discovers Earth a long time ago. One of the crew members named Bertrand goes out to investigate with the robot. They meet a primitive man named Jan. Bertrand gains Jan's trust by having his robot shoot and kill various game animals, which he then gives to Jan as a gift, as a peace offering. And eventually, his crew has to leave, but Bertrand leaves behind Jan and his people some of his various gadgets that they can use in primitive Earth. A really sharp knife, a flashlight, there was some other stuff. They give it to him as a gift because he kind of felt bad for him, like, oh, we got to leave you without giving you any knowledge, any help, so here's some of my extra stuff that you can have. And I'm sure, like the apes in the 2001 story, that probably helped Jan's people, his little village that he lived in, have an advantage over other rival villages because something mysterious from space came out of nowhere and gave him these magical gifts, just like the monolith gave the apes knowledge on how to use tools. Encounter in the Dawn was obviously from the space explorer's point of view, while the beginning part of 2001 was obviously from the point of view of the recipient of the knowledge/tools from the space guy. Next, let's talk about the visuals and the editing in 2001. First off, this movie looks amazing. The visuals alone is one of the best things about this and a great reason by itself to just watch this movie. You can really appreciate how meticulous they were and how closely they strive for perfection when setting up all these scenes. Everything is so clean and minimal and futuristic looking. The visuals haven't aged a day, and if you didn't know, you could be surprised to learn how long ago this movie was actually made just looking at the quality of these shots. Another reason to see the movie is that besides looking cool, a lot of these shots are very culturally significant and iconic. They transcend the movie. You don't even have to know the movie to know the dun, 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 dun. In fact, they even reference that in the first Barbie movie trailer. I don't know why, but, you know. Also, like Spartacus, the version of the movie I saw still had space for the intermission in the middle of it. Obviously, no movie nowadays in 2025 has intermissions like that, so it's kind of funny to be home watching this on your couch, and then in the middle of the movie there's a roughly 3-minute break where you think you're supposed to go to the bathroom, go get some snacks, while the film projector guy maybe put in a new reel of film because the thing is so long. It's a relic from a different era. You really don't see those anymore. When did they stop doing intermissions? I should look that up. I couldn't find an exact date that they stopped. They just kind of gradually fell out of fashion with popular films in the US. Although apparently they're still commonly used for really long Bollywood movies, this chatbot told me. I guess that's true. I don't know. I don't watch Bollywood. Also, the set design for this movie looks amazing. Minimal, efficient, clean, clinical are some words that come to mind to describe the various sets in this movie. They have a very unique look to them. One of my favorites being the weird room out of time that the monoliths built for Dave at the end. It's kind of funny. It's like the aliens attempted to make a habitat for an Earthman that they don't really know anything about, so there's so many eras and styles mashed into one. In fact, it kind of looks like one of those Vaporwave album covers. Also, regarding the film's minimalist style, I like how the villain of the movie, the evil robot AI HAL 9000, is really just a rectangle with a little circle camera on the wall. And whenever they show him, it's just a close-up of this thing that's just sitting still on the wall. Maybe in some other sci-fi movie, they would have a physical, big, scary, evil robot. But this thing is basically just like a thermostat on the wall. You don't see many villains looking like thermostats. Great example of the less is more approach. Also, while talking about the visuals, I've obviously got to mention the star tunnel scene at the end, as it's known. I haven't seen this movie in a while, and I watched it again for making this video, and I am just still mesmerized by the star tunnel scene. How in the world did they make some of these visuals without CGI? And watching this, knowing there's no computer rendering helping them, is just amazing. These are really some out-of-this-world kind of visuals. Next, let's talk about the audio and the music for 2001. So one of the things that 2001 is really known for is its all classical music soundtrack. The most famous one being that Thus Spake Zarathustra song, or however you say it, that dun 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 dum dum dum. You know, that one. There's some moments in the movie where the music accompanies the visuals very well and they elevate one another. A great example being this exterior shot of this giant spaceship rotating slowly while the classical music plays. It kind of makes me think I'm watching like a space ballet or something. The all classical music soundtrack, I think, really gives the movie a timeless quality and doesn't tie it to the era it was made. You know, that being the late 1960s, the explosion of rock and roll and psychedelic music. Imagine if they used contemporary music for this, how weird that would seem, where, like, you know, that whole section where the scientist guy is going out to the moon and maybe he's on the moon cart and they're riding along. It's like some Vietnam thing. They're playing All Along the Watchtower by Hendrix. Or, I don't know, like Jumpin' Jack Flash by the Rolling Stones plays for Frank and Dave's intro scene. It's not that kind of movie. Another one of my favorite parts of the soundtrack that I think works really well is the really creepy choir music that plays whenever the monolith shows up. Imagine hearing that alone at night in a dark room. The movie's sound effects are as sparse and minimal as the visuals. The two really complement one another. Sometimes there's minutes that go by when all we hear is a mechanical space beeping sound. Or, for example, we hear Dave's breaths in his spacesuit. It's simple, but it really helps build the tension because it puts you right there with that character in his spacesuit, all alone by himself, floating in space, and you're hearing what he would hear. I mean, I'll tell you, if that was me, I wouldn't be breathing like that. I would have hyperventilated to the point of passing out. I also like the scene where Dave is unplugging Hal, how Hal's voice quality gets worse and worse and worse until he can barely form words. I thought it was kind of funny. I don't know if it's supposed to be creepy or sad or what, but I started laughing at some point.
Give me your land, Sir.
So what's my overall impression of the movie? Well, if you want to get into Stanley Kubrick's movies, this is very important. It is a must-see. Like I mentioned, it is one of the most famous and analyzed and copied and referenced movies of all time. The science fiction elements of the movie I think were way ahead of their time and have aged very well. I've also always liked the wild, psychedelic, ambiguous ending for this movie. I can't call it a conclusion, it's just the end of the movie. I don't really know what it concludes because, hell, it's confusing. Confuses me every time I see it. Confused a lot of other people who saw it for the first time or continue to watch it. There are endless books, articles, video essays analyzing this movie. It's one of those things you can interpret however you want to interpret it. The ending kind of makes me think of a David Lynch movie where it can't really be explained, you're just supposed to feel it. You get what I'm saying? You can't. You have to go watch this and feel it for yourself. See what I did there? That was dumb. This movie is also pretty different from Stanley Kubrick's other movies that came before. I mean, the one he did before this was Strangelove, and before that was Lolita. So it really shows his artistic range. But I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not just going to sit here and say, oh my God, this is an A+++, absolute must-see. It's the greatest film of all time, just because it's highly regarded, influential, and all the critics love it. If you're familiar with my channel, I hope you can get a sense that I like movies. I like different types of movies. I have a general appreciation for film. That said, parts of this were really boring to me. There. I said it. Call me a uneducated simpleton for saying that, but I'm just giving you my honest opinion, man. And if you're just talking about sci-fi, oh my God, this is always in the top 3, if not the best sci-fi movie of all time. So saying you don't like a part of it, some people are going to be like, oh, it's heresy. How could you ever say that about 2001? So for example, after watching the movie for like an hour, I've already got used to the pacing of it. You know, it's going to be one of those slow, methodical kind of movies. Okay, cool. I know that already. Let's say, for example, some scene happens. I take in the visuals. Wow, that looks really cool. And then you watch the guy moving. You watch the actor doing something. I'm like, okay, I see what he's doing. He's going somewhere. And then you sit there and you give it another little bit to just sink in and appreciate the scene. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna see what's going on. And then 5 minutes later, nothing has happened. And you're still sitting there watching the same scene. And I'm like, okay, all right, he's floating in space. He's still floating in space. Okay. This is obviously one of those movies you have to be in the mood to watch. It's not like, hey, the boys are coming over Friday night. Put on 2001, the extended cut. We're going crazy tonight. I get it. That's just the style of the movie. That's just its pace. They're going for realism and it's outer space. So everything's going to be kind of slow because of the lack of gravity and all that. Okay, cool. I get that. But another example I would say is the star tunnel scene. And I'm like, oh, here's the cool part. All right, let's watch this. And you see the colors. You see the light. He's going deeper and deeper through time or space or whatever the hell is going on. And you're watching. You're like, oh, there's some landscape. There's the triangles. There's colors. Or there's more colors. There's more triangles. And then 10 minutes later, there's still just landscape and color and triangles and random close-ups of Dave's face. And it went on for like, what was it, 12, 13 minutes, maybe more? After a point, I was like, all right, guys, I get it. Like, how long does this have to go on for? You know, and I don't want to seem like the young person who has no attention span and can't appreciate anything, but like, I do think this scene just went on for way too long. Last section. For this, I always like to close out with some random fun thoughts that I jotted down while watching this movie. So I don't know if Stanley Kubrick or Arthur C. Clarke did a lot of psychedelic drugs or anything. I don't know, haven't read anything about that, don't really care, but just my impression of this is that, think of like the Beatles discography. Early, mid-60s when they were starting, it's that cutesy boy band, I want to hold your hand kind of stuff. And then think about the late 60s. It seems like two completely different bands. Now, I'm comparing that to Stanley Kubrick's filmography in the 60s, or his few movies before this. You had Lolita, small drama movie. It's mostly just like two people talking in cars and rooms. And then you had Dr. Strangelove, which is also in black and white, and just a lot of people talking in rooms, more or less. And then you get this at the end of the 60s, which is this big, epic, ambiguous, philosophical, kind of methodical, slow space story that takes place over millions of years and many miles and goes into a different dimension. It's as big of a shift like that for me. I like this one shot right here, how it's done from low, looking up at the guy. It kind of reminds me of a boxing scene from an earlier Kubrick movie called Killer's Kiss. Another thing I think is funny is that this movie is rated G. This isn't really for kids. I guess a G rating doesn't mean it was made for kids, but that they could watch it, but I can't really see many kids watching this and really getting it. I thought the voice acting for Hal was incredible. It's the perfect blend of calm robot versus creepy robot. It was always just 10% untrustworthy, no matter what he was saying. Like, thank you, Dave. I hope you have a good day. I like to look on Dave's face here when he realizes he's revealed too much to Hal. You can almost see him going,
I could see your lips move.
I just think it's a cool little detail that in this giant space station, there were space hotels with the Hilton brand and the Howard Johnson brand. I like this one little line where they mention how old Hal is in the movie, and I realize that I am older than Hal is supposed to be, which is, I don't know what that means.
I became operational on the 12th of January, 1992.
And the whole portion of this movie of Hal having his secret mission and directives and ulterior motives kind of reminds me of the Weyland Corporation from the Alien series, like from the first movie and from Prometheus, how there was that one robot guy aboard who really had his own agenda that no one else knew. That's kind of like the role Hal had in the story. Well, that is about it for today. If you stuck around to this point, thank you very much. I appreciate it as always, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.